No one left any questions. You can always do that. Leave a question on the live before it goes live. You can leave comments, and I believe I can see them. But I just had questions throughout the week. This is supposed to be on the neck, but we'll get back to the neck next week. Do a little warm up to answer one of the questions, which is why are we always twisted? So I'll just kind of talk through that as I do it. Got my tea here, a little pumpkin spice chai. All right. So, on your backs, or just sit there and drink your coffee or whatever. So we did some in class. We did on Thursday. We did supine decompression, and we did an anchored bridge. Good for what? Feeling your hamstrings, working that hamstring to lengthen position, which is good to let it release. And the other question I'll try to ask is why are we always twisted? Where does that come from? Put my head down this way so you can semi-hear me. Oh, I know I need to get like one of those earpieces. I have a wireless mic. It's just when I move a lot, it sits here on my hip. It just doesn't work well with swinging kettlebells and stuff. Usually just cuts out. So just a tiny bit of knee bend. For the anchor bridge, we bring a little bit more. For here, just a little bit. And I want you to feel the difference between the left and the right heel. So pulling up the big toes and the outside edges of the feet. The outside edges of the feet lifting. Also, you notice wraps and squeezes the hips. So you want that middle of the, not the knee just going together. You should feel like rotating the hips in, because that is the goal. Getting these hips to rotate in. I can feel the back of my rib cage is flat to the ground. It's okay to lift up and get that there. Back of the head. Back of the rib cage, flat on the ground. Just go hands on your mat, reaching your shoulders down. Do a couple breaths. Try pushing your left heel harder into the ground. Push your right heel harder into the ground. Do that again, left heel harder in the ground. And then right heel harder, and let that one wrap even more. Now most people, this left side of the pelvis comes forward, it rotates forward. And that makes it appear, if I really exaggerate it, see my right foot turns out. It's not the hip itself, it's an optical illusion. It is the orientation of the pelvis forward on the left. Why does this happen? Hip flexor here, diaphragm attaches the diaphragm. They're one. This diaphragm is smaller on the left. The right is just bigger. And that is just like saying you have more ab musculature, 10% more ab musculature on your right. So it's going to slowly twist you. Ancient man, was not symmetrical. Why? Because he'd have to throw a spear. The liver on one side. It's just not an evenness. So we'll see with the spine, as the pelvis comes forward, so the spine goes with it. That front lumbars also rotate, which makes the right shoulder counter-rotate, so you don't walk in circles. This is where a lot of our neck problems come from. And the neck can start doing things later in life. Most people have this pattern to start with, and then the right pelvis will try to come forward as well. And then we lose that forced closure we've been talking about on the sacrum. Both iliums are rotating away from the sacrum. But really, this pattern never goes away. You just might have other layers on top of it, other neck distortions. The right shoulder goes forward, then the neck and the collarbone. Everything starts doing different things throughout your life. So we have to strip the layers, bring that back. So for me, the idea of, let's go a little more knee bend here. So we're going to our anchored bridge. Just pushing that right heel in. Think about, turning the hip in, but it's more about, I'm bringing my front of my right pelvis forward. And that's harder. it feels tougher on that heel to do that. It wants to be out here because of where the pelvis is. So pulling the toes up, rotating. I can feel that stretching my left QL, my left psoas. Big stretch right there. Essentially, I'm adjusting my lumbar spine and bringing it back where it belongs. Teaching it to work in that position, retraining it, getting those muscles to talk to the brain, be like, hey, this is probably where it should be. All right, back of the head, nice and long. Start dragging. I say drag, and people start actually dragging their heels. We're just squeezing. No movements happening. It's isometric. I'm squeezing my heels towards my butt. That's when you feel those hamstrings from your sit bones behind your knees start to work. Let's just do both right now. Rapid squeeze pretty hard with both. If you're noticing one's weaker, like me with the right, I'm just going to push that one in even harder. And I'm just going to try to lift just the left shoulder, just the right pelvis first. I'm pushing harder with my left arm, pushing harder with my right heel. And bring that right hand up. Pin that right shoulder down, try to lift the left one up. Squeeze harder that right heel. Pulling that heel down to the ground and up, but it's not going anywhere, right? Just dragging. And then we'll bring the other arm up to meet it. Squeeze really hard with the heels into the ground. Breathe. 10 breaths. That butt is just hovering an inch off the mat. Hands down, lower the hips. Hamstrings should really hate me right now, but they should also love me at the same time. That's a great way to do that exercise. How to get the right pelvis to lift, left shoulder to lift, to counter rotate that constant torsion, that twist in the spine that we have due to the pelvis being out of place. Let's run through it one more time. Get the head on the mat here. That'd be a little more comfortable. All right. That'll be better for my posture too. So, your knees maybe 6 inches off the ground. Big toes wrapping and squeezing. When I do that, I notice it pulls my belly in. Both hip flexors are activated here to help turn the hips in. What I like about this is our pelvis is locked. And the next 2 exercises, that's the goal. It's locking the pelvis to the floor, which keeps it from moving. You don't have to worry about it. When we squat, that pelvis might naturally shift left. We might have a lot of these problems we always see. Pull the left, pull the right. Push the left arm in hard. You'll see the shoulder come up a little bit. Shoulder blade, that's what we want. Not just the shoulder itself rotating in, but the blade lifting. Not your scapula mirrors your ilium, right? On the left, what is it doing? Loves to turn in towards the spine. On the right, same thing, it's turning in too much. So we're trying to get both to laterally rotate. Pelvis, we're trying to get it to laterally rotate forward as we lift. Do it, help that pelvis. Laterally rotate. pushing hard, pulling hard with my right heel towards my opposite butt cheek. Reach. A little bit more to the left. Let's go overhead this time. Just forehead level. A few more breaths. One more. Okay. That should feel really good on your back too. Should loosen things up. Go ahead, feel free. Leave a comment, question. I'll talk about it. Next two I want to go over is the Russian twist. So you need your kettlebell. Actually, you don't actually need a kettlebell for this one. So don't want this super light. We don't want to be around it, and we don't want to just bashing this off the ground. Pretend like your wife and a small baby are sleeping in the house. You don't want to be banging the kettlebell, because they actually are sleeping in my house. So I've had patients hurt themselves doing this. I didn't give them this exercise, but I actually remember giving one of the guys this exercise as the correction. He's like, this is the exercise that hurt me. I'm like, yeah, no, we're just gonna change it up a little bit. So we can think about that pelvis rotation. So if I got the feet up, again, like my sit bones, my feet hovering, they're pretty locked. What we can do is even situate that, but if you take that left sit bone, you walk it back just a hair. Might feel awkward, might feel uneven, but that's actually making that correction here. Walking that pelvis back on the left, just a hair. So you can actually walk that back, and then it's gonna stick there on the ground. And this wants to pull and drag, just got that locked. And it should feel, these two bones in the front should feel pretty equal. One shouldn't be jutting forward. Generally, this feels pretty good on the low back. So if we go right, that can pull that left pelvis more forward. Now, I'm not saying don't go right. I'm saying be very careful when you do. Now, if we're just sloppy and we're going right the whole time, this shouldn't be a lot of lumbar rotation and pelvic rotation anyways. It should be more mid-back, working the shoulders, working, loosening up that rib cage. It shouldn't be a low back swivel. And sometimes that's a weight issue. If the weight is too light, same with our swings. We'll get into the kettlebell swing here today too, because that was another question. If it's too light, you're just not going to be lifting and stacking and opening up and stiffening that lower spine as much as you should. Because again, we shouldn't be doing 100 of these. So this is a little light for me. It's 40 maybe is more where it's at. It's just longer, so it just touches the ground earlier, which is actually maybe a good thing now that I think about it. Because I don't want you to actually hit the ground. It's a tap at least, or maybe even just close. Just go side to side. Because when we tap, that's when the low spine tends to do the work. So especially with those short, if you have shorter kettlebells, this is a competition which is naturally longer. So those cast iron ones, they're just shorter anyway. So definitely don't even try to touch the ground with that kettlebell. Let's just shut up and do it. So we've walked that pelvis back. We try to orient the pelvis in neutral. Got it by the horns, and I'm hovering those feet up. I'm thinking don't round. I'm thinking hold my head and neck long, breathing, bracing. I'm just going to the side of the hip here, not even touching the ground. This should stiffen my low back. Mid back's going. other reason I like this is, again, the hip flexors are working. Whew. Your body loves to tuck the pelvis to try to get the hip flexor to work. We call that posterior pelvic tilt. So I'll show you from the side. I want you on your sit bones. So I'm having you, in general, we untuck the left even more. But some people, they sit down, they're not even on their sit bones really. The pelvis is tucked underneath, and that just sets them up to be very rounded here. Get your head up, grab your butt, walk it back a little bit, get those sit bones. That's where your hamstrings attach. You can see my butt. Don't look at my butt. Right there. We just brought the left back to bring the right forward. But I'm more on my sit bones, which, you're gonna be a little rounded. It's okay. Shouldn't be like super strict, shouldn't be super arched either. I just don't want butt tucked and spine flexed, because then it's all motion, shearing forces at the low back. So we do this again. Put my butt on the wood here. Get some splinters so you can see me from the side. I'd be right there, that's fine. All right, so bring that pelvis back on the left. Sit bones are pretty locked to that mat, so there shouldn't be a lot of pelvis shift. Hips are working. The hips are free to move. The hip flexors aren't really engaged. So you notice the feet may turn left to right. That's good. That's okay. They're allowed to do that. Mid back, allowed to move. Low back should not be moving. Let's try the 40. Let's see if my theory holds water here, if it's heavier weight. Get that pelvis locked underneath, lifting those hips. It's a big boy. And you know, in CrossFit world, they're telling you, oh, let's quick do 50 of those. And that's when you get sloppy. That probably wasn't even 10, right? So just slow and controlled, work on your breathing, and that'll be more restorative and corrective. All right, thought I saw something. Next, same thing. Pelvis locked down to the floor. This is tough for some people. Start down here. Taking that kettlebell. Maybe just start here in this rack position. Same thing, we're trying to not have the butt tucked in. Now my legs are just flat. The only time I'm picking them up is to do this little walk. So each time, let's try to really exaggerate. Pulling forward more with the right pelvis. Walk to the edge of the mat. Good. Then I'm gonna pull back. More with the left. More with the left. More with the left. You're essentially doing that little walk we did in the last one, just to correct that pelvis. But now we're just repeating it over and over, over. And you can pick up those feet a little bit more than I was. Good. Then we'll repeat it on the other side. Rack position, big chest. Don't let your butt be tucked too much. Stay upright. Push more with the right. More with the right. really silly. It's great. It's a great exercise. We're gonna add something to this. I think you already know where I'm going with it. Why one-sided? This makes the other side work more. The other side that doesn't have the kettlebell has to work more to stabilize. I'd rather you go heavy weight on one side. It isn't very heavy at all. Probably heavy if you're just starting out with kettlebells. Then 2 kettlebells on both sides. Same thing with the suitcase carry. Suitcase, you're not carrying 2 suitcases at once. It's farmer carry if you're using 2. You'll notice farmer carries feels easier. One side's awkward. I want it to be awkward because you're trying to balance out that other side when you're doing a one-sided carry. It's a great corrective exercise. Doesn't really work on my short porch, but definitely do that one. We'll do that stuff in class. Now what are we doing? You know it. Overhead press. Locking that arm overhead. Walking forward. Just try to reach a little bit more. Exaggerate the reach with the right when going forward. Each step a mini correction. Push my head through. I'm reaching back. More with the left. You're walking with your sit bones. Switch it up. Reach that right. Reach that right. Reach back with the left. Back with the left pelvis. Oh, lordy, lordy, lordy. So, let's reach back with the left. Check that pelvis. You should know when you get that pelvis back, you just let your feet relax. My right is still turned out too much. So let's reach back, but also out to the side a little bit. Back and out. Now let the hips go. Look at that. Not trying more. I'm not. That's, you look at your feet. Pelvis forward on the left. It goes forward, but it also does this. So it naturally points that right foot out. So I had to pull my sit bone back and laterally. So a little more anterior tilt, if you will, the pelvis on the left. You could say it's forward on the left, isn't that anterior? It's moved anterior, but in a chiropractic world, we would call that a PI ilium. It would be a PIEX ilium. That sit bone has gone more towards the sacrum. I feel that on most people. I'll feel weird things on some people because they've just compensated for that. When it's been there so long, your body is just trying to seek balance, so it does weird things. So I see lots of different weird things, but it's helpful to just know that that's where everyone started. So grabbing that sit bone, bring it back and up. Much more even there in the hips. So let's just keep that there. We'll do that press. Locking that in. Might feel funny, that's okay. Try to just do. Let's go back to the left. Nice and tall. Let's do 10 presses each side. Getting length, pulling myself through. Little collapse there, not in the low back, just rounding in the mid back. holding myself forward. Driving my head, not just my head, but my head's bringing my spine with it. Two more, I think. That sun is nice and bright. Come on, somebody ask a question. It's like class. If they know how to ask questions, they have to stay on here longer. Just get it over with. Hear ya. Other side, 10. Or whatever that was. It's hard to count and talk. Let's reorientate that pelvis. Pull that sit bone back and out to the left. As I press, I'm untucking my pelvis even more. Should feel like a little more weight is on the left hip. Hip flexors. Just got brutalized. 3 exercises. Remember, the hip flexor goes all the way to the diaphragm. Meet me in a kneeling position. You should feel it when we breathe. Speaking of locking things to the ground, this is also helpful. Now I don't really have to think about stabilizing the knee because it is locked to the ground, and that's a big problem. People love to get their knees to work for them. So let's just go wide for once. Not wide, just not together. Feet to the outside edges of the mat, so the heels are wider than the knees. Tea is cold already. Tucking the feet in. Okay. Check your pelvis. The pinky should always be here on the pelvis anyways when you're doing measuring stick hands. So if you're feeling it more forward on the left, just bring that right into that right pinky a little bit more. And then we're gonna spread, drive the knees wide, bring the head tall. Pelvis should feel equal there in the front. I can feel my left rib cage is lifting. That's very classic as well. This side loves to inhale a lot. It extends too much, the rib cage lifts. That psoas is not as strong on the right. So feeling that pelvis, push that back. Tuck that rib cage underneath on the left side. Feel very awkward up in the neck. It'll feel very imbalanced. That's okay, you are imbalanced. Hate to break it to you. We're all twisted. A lot of people get away with it. So people like me, no. I haven't got away with it since I was 19 years old. Probably even before that. So I'm not letting that rib cage lift. I'm holding on, I'm hooking it. I'm helping. Grabbing onto that. Keep slipping away. All these muscles, scalenes, intercostals are tight around that left. It's very hard to breathe here. Abs are working double time. Hold that rib cage down in the front so we can open it up in the back. Shaking. This is just as hard as everything else I've done. I'm driving the knees wide. I'm pushing the heels out. Just turn the hips in. And a little harder on the left. Push that left heel out harder. It should orientate the right pelvis forward on the right. Right pelvis forward on the right. Yes, set it correct. That left hip is actually very externally rotated. But the foot doesn't point out. It confused me for years. Because it's the pelvis. The pelvis is the big player. The pelvis and the spine are twisting. So I really started to pay attention to the muscles, which chiropractors just don't teach. I'm not taught to look at the muscles. You could see, especially when a person's standing. When they're laying, you don't notice it because everything is just relaxed. When they're standing, you see it 100%. The foot's still pointed out on the right. All you gotta do is pay attention to the pelvis and just feel the musculature on the left, that piriformis, those external rotators, turning that left hip out. Makes the right foot more dominant, but there's more weight on the right foot. The right side is, in a way, more dominant. And then the lat becomes very dominant. Trap becomes very dominant on the right, and we'll see this band from the skull all the way down to the pelvis. It's really tight on the right on most people. Let's do one more thing here, kneeling. Big toes together. Now it should be a little easier to get those heels wider than the knees. So before we were doing outward anchor, now we're doing an inward anchor, which is a wrap and squeeze. Driving those heels wide. I have to hinge a little bit. I have to bring my weight over my knees more. Not a lot of weight in the toes. And that allows me to pull that rib cage down. It's a little crunch from the mid-back. Breathing, breathing. Side view here. No complaints about how this hurts your knees because I'm on a wooden beam here. Very thin mat. Tucking those feet in. Rounding. Opening up the mid-back vertebrae. Which pulls the front of the rib cage down. Elbows wide. I'm getting my weight over my knees. Then I think about the neck. Pushing that neck up and back. To really add length as I wrap and squeeze. Let's go out. Into a platter. When I reach with the platter, helps me open everything up. Look in your hands. A little pelvis correction there. Maybe it was where it needed to be. I don't know. It felt funny. So when you're breathing, you might feel uneven. It feels uneven to me. Maybe I look uneven. Who knows? But that's okay. I'm pressing my body away from my palms. So my elbows can't straighten out anymore here. Pubic bones reaching back. Front of the rib cage is reaching back. Choking yourself with your collarbones. Oh, God. That's good. Oh. Swings. Finish up the swings. We've done a lot of swings already, so should be quick. So a couple of people had questions on swings. Most people do a squatty type swing. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're just doing a double-handed swing, for most people, the issue is getting those hips to do what we've just been talking about, which is hinge properly with no movement happening at the spine. It's the hip itself, and then to internally rotate, spiral. Not go knock-kneed, which is good in swing, because if you go knock-kneed, you're gonna hit yourself with a kettlebell probably. Now the sun's back. So we're hinging, and as the kettlebell goes in the backswing, we wrap a little bit, but it's from the hips, not the knees. So the key is hold on to the mat with your feet. On the backswing, we're holding on. The feet are gripping. I think that's where people are afraid to go too far back. They're afraid of, whoa, I'm gonna knock myself backwards. But your feet should be holding on to the mat in the swing. We go into the backswing. It's like our founder, right? Hips are hinging back. Shins become more vertical. The knee's not forward to the ankle. It's, watch the knees. I'm pulling it back by reaching the hip back more. A lot of people's knees are here. I'm like, we'll straighten the knees out. And they just pitch forward more. And then when you pitch forward more, that's just pressure right here. This is not a true founder. So bend your knees. Yes, that brings your spine more locked. Locking the spine, watch this. Just the hips reaching back. Notice the difference. I didn't, what? This is bad. Why? There's several things. Shoulders have gone up. We've opened the low back. That sounds good to a lot of people. I think that's a yoga thing. We're thinking, open the low back. No, 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 no. We're keeping it protected, stabilized. We don't want that low back opening up during the back swing, especially when we're dealing with weight. It's a decompression of sorts, right? General length in the spine. But I'm not pulling length in the low back by pulling my shoulders up like this. It's the head pulling up. So there is a lengthening and a locking, but I don't want any flexion. I don't want any extension of that low spine. Neutral. So it's more of a hinge. It's a lot of a hinge. So most people, when they do it, the knees bend and they go a little low. It's probably fine. You're doing like a bit of a squat. But if you really want to increase your hip mobility and make the hip a bigger part, because then when you do that, it's harder to push. You can't really push your arms with your legs. It's up higher. My forearms are here, and I'm really hinging. It's like you hinge. I heard it once when I was in Colorado. A lady said it. I'm like, I like that. It's like you hinge, and then you hinge again, and then you push it. I'm like, that's it. You hinge, and then you hinge again. Give me some extra hinge on that hinge, and then you're close to where we want to be. There's such thing as a swing squat. We've done it before, but I squat when the kettlebell goes out. So if you want your squat, yeah, you can turn out. You won't have as much hinge when the feet are slightly turned out. It's your standard foundation training principle. When we hinge here, it's harder. But when I go out, I can squat in that position. But that's an advanced move. Most people, let's just increase the hip mobility. Neck is the other thing. Watch the neck. A lot of people are hinging when they hinge, and their neck is hinging here. There's only one thing hinging. It's your hips. Shoulders just going along for the ride. They shouldn't be powering that kettlebell up. The guy was watching me yesterday. He's like, oh yeah, you're not bringing that very high. I'm like, yeah, if anything, especially because his shoulders hurt him, so he's stopping doing swings. I'm like, kettlebell, those swings are pretty basic. I'm like, if you hurt your shoulder, you're probably using your shoulder too much. This is not a shoulder exercise. It's a hip exercise. It's definitely a lot of things. But you just keep that kettlebell really cool. Let it float a little bit. Let it float a little bit. Okay? Let's hit a few. Probably have to go this direction. I don't want to smack my railing here. Everything's in the setup. In fact, let's do a double setup. Stack that spine. Hinge those hips. Founder. Reach those hips back. grab onto that kettlebell, pulling your hips back and up, grabbing on the ground with my feet. Couple breaths here. Tilted the kettlebell, pulling it back, stiffening my spine, pulling my chin in. Think about those three things. Choke yourself with your collarbones. Pull the ribcage back. Pull the pubic bones back. It's just something I've been saying lately. I've never heard that in foundation training, but those are the 3 points that make sense to me. Because normally they say chin back, chest up. Just like choke yourself with your collarbones. That skips a step. Ribcage back, so we're opening up the mid back a little bit more. Pulling the pubic bones back, which will wrap the hips in. The top, I'm squeezing my glutes, driving my heels in. At the back swing, reaching my hips way behind me, following the kettlebell. My hips are just following the kettlebell, receiving it. I'm not stopping it. I guess I'm kind of stopping it. I'm trying to follow it as much as I can. Let me do one arm swing. I can reach back more with the hip on the opposite side. So right hand, left hip's reaching more. More weight on that left leg. One more on the right. I've angled the kettlebell a little bit. You can angle it any way you want. If this feels better on your shoulder, go for it. I'm used to that way. Let's try this way with the thumb out. Why I like the thumb in, it's easier to push my arm pretty much with my pelvis, upper hips. Looking down at the ground, looking at the horizon, keeping that neck neutral. That's it. Stiff spine. My head is looking 6 feet in front of me. The bottom of the hinge. One of our lives, we could do a whole hour on the kettlebell swing, building up to it with foundation training moves. So just go back to the lives. I think it's called swing. So it would have been like day one swing. But all three of those. Or there's probably not three, I think it was just two. Right, I don't see any questions. Nope. That was a longer one because there's lots of talking, but good work. See you Tuesday.